In today's video, we're going to talk about tuning the SPT, the automatic transmission, on the VB WRX. Now, if you drive a manual, that doesn't mean you have to go, because this is a super interesting video. You should stay because some of the counterpart of this community drives the automatic WRX. It's not a bad thing. It's, in my opinion, not as fun as a car, but stick through because you might just find out that maybe they can make more horsepower than you think and hold on that transmission. And for those of you that drive the SPT, what used to be the CVT, which is still a CVT, we've just relabeled it the SPT. We're going to talk about how much horsepower can you run, how much torque can you run, what's the top performance of your vehicle, how is it limited, what can you do with your car, and basically everything you need to know about tuning an automatic transmission or CVT transmission VB WRX. So if you guys aren't aware, when I actually started this channel, I wanted to somehow, make it on YouTube or do that or get some attention, and I realized that nobody was making content about the CVT WRX, and this is the CVT VA WRX. So I got into the WRX platform, and my first WRX was a CVT WRX. Most of you guys are going to cringe by that, but I did it because nobody was making content, and I was also in a position where I couldn't have a manual. It wasn't convenient for my life. Short amount of time later, obviously I sold that car and got into a manual, and I just dealt with it, and I've loved the manual since, and it was a personal choice, but sometimes people just can't drive the manual. So obviously Subaru in today's day and age, obviously they have an automatic platform. A little bit of history. It's still a CVT, if you didn't know that. It's now called the SPT, the Subaru Performance Transmission, but it's just a CVT transmission. And it is slightly different from the VA CVT. How much different? Not a whole lot. So, a few things have changed around tuning and all that stuff, but let's just get into it. So, if you want to tune your automatic transmission WRX, there are some key things to understand here. One, you're never going to compete with a manual. It's just not going to happen. You can't do it. You can't run as much power. And especially with the VB WRX making more power than it did relatively to the VA, your limitations are a lot lower than I think you want them to be. You're not even going to get through a stage 1 tune. I'm just going to say it out there. A stage 1 tune on a manual VB is going to outperform a stage 1 on a CVT or an SPT. I have to get used to saying that, on an SPT, because you can't even be tuned as high. They need to limit the tune so you're not running as high torque and horsepower numbers. What is the limitation? On the CVT transmission, you can only put so much torque on the clutch aspect of the CVT because it is running as a CVT. It's a continuously variable transmission, which means it isn't even mimicking gears. I mean, there is some gear mimicking in the WRX platform, the GT, the SPT. All the differences that you're feeling as a driver are modulated, right? They're made up essentially. It's not actually shifting through gears. It's, shifting through a different performance pattern to make it feel like it's shifting through gears, if that makes sense. It's all modulated through the TCU, the transmission control unit. So what does that even mean? We're not going to get into the in-deeps of how a CVT transmission is made, because that's probably not why you guys are here. And if you are, let me know in the comment section below and I can do that. And we can break one down and look at the ISO diagram and break down all the pieces and how a CVT is put together. What you need to know is that there are limits. There are performance limits to the car before that transmission starts to slip, and when you slip a CVT, you start to break it. It's not like slipping a clutch where you can replace the clutch and it fixes the car. Slipping a CVT actually damages the transmission itself. Again, it damages the entirety of the transmission. You need to know that. So what does that really mean? It means that most tuners and most off-the-shelf tune providers, won't provide tunes that will get you into that range. What they want to do is they want to provide you as much power and torque as possible without having your CVT transmission start to slip. Because once it starts to slip, you start doing, irreversible damage. And the only way to fix it once it actually goes is replacing the entirety of the transmission, which again, a cheap replacement, you're talking $5,000 or $6,000. More likely you're spending about $8,000 plus tax to get it replaced. It also affects your warranty. I will just say that if you tune the car and lose the transmission and put a new one in, you're only getting a 12-month warranty on that part, especially if it's done from Subaru. If it's not through Subaru, you're not getting any warranty, and you're probably losing your powertrain warranty. There's some nuance there, so don't quote me on it. But the numbers, that's why you guys are here. So the numbers are very similar to what they used to, and we're still learning more about it because people are tuning it more and more, but we're still right around the same thing. The upper limit, we're talking the upper limit of what you want to run for a daily driver is around 300 wheel horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. Some people are pushing it to 330, 315, maybe 340, But after those numbers, you're in the realm of you could slip, and then it becomes the type of driving. There are going to be some builds out there where people run 350, 360, 370, but they're not flooring it. They're just doing it to hit the numbers, and they're willing to risk their transmission, and that's part of the fun for the car. Honestly, if you are driving one and you're tuning it, you're probably looking for an optimized power curve. That's one of the reasons you're tuning it. You're tuning it to get the sound, you're tuning it to put different parts on that make it feel more fun to drive, but you're probably optimizing it for about 300 wheel horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. Again, maybe 315, 330. It really depends on your tuner, because also they don't want to have failed builds and failed tunes, so they're going to obviously protect themselves and make their recommendations from that. But that's probably what you're looking for the upper bounds of what you can run on the SPT transmission. Obviously, this is subject to change as we continue to engineer in the aftermarket community, but it probably really won't change, because I don't think anyone's going to develop something that goes into the transmission. No one's going to crack the casing on the transmission. So it's all about how do you run the power and not start slipping or not start having issues. And the short answer is there just aren't enough of you out there that have the automatic transmission for companies to put in the time and effort to develop products or further test it and risk the transmission themselves. And it's not like there's a magic solution here. I'm just speaking about getting an extra 5 or 10 or figuring out where exactly that band is, or running 100K miles on a car just to figure out what the long term is. We're just going to see what time comes, but that's what your limits are. Again, it's very similar to the CVT on the V8 WRX, not that the transmission's the same, but the upper bounds are the same. Again, I would say the difference between the transmissions, you're probably getting an extra 30 wheel horsepower and maybe 30 to 35 pound-feet of torque before you start having issues. That's just based on, one, the numbers that we've seen, and based on also a little bit of my engineering knowledge as a mechanical engineer, looking at the upgrades and the differences in parts, and what we're seeing with other Subaru models, and just some other anecdotal stuff about generally how CVTs are put together and how they've progressed, and what the SPT on the new WRX is versus the old WRX. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully this was somewhat interesting, and hopefully you're not disappointed, because if you want to run big numbers, you got to get a manual. That's just how it works. That's how, that's not going to change likely for the Subaru platforms, because they're going to continue to have manuals. They're not competing against other automatic only cars. When you're thinking about high horsepower builds on automatic cars, which is like almost every sports car out there right now, which sucks, but it is what it is. Those cars are designed to be high horsepower cars with an automatic transmission. The WRX is being offered for an automatic for convenience to help build the community, but it's not their main seller. It's not going to ever be likely, well, not in the next decade. So that's the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And if you want to follow the build of my VB WRX, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you guys later.